Today, we're breaking down one of the most explosive moments revealed in Spare, the so called peace meeting at Kensington Palace that turned into anything but. This wasn't just casual tea. This was Meghan, Catherine, William, and Harry sitting down to smooth over tensions, and instead, what unfolded was a masterclass in manipulation. From a casual insult about Catherine's hormones to gaslighting and minimization, to Meghan provoking conflict and then retreating into innocence, the entire malignant narcissism cycle was played out step by step. And here's the kicker: if you've ever had someone cut you down with a joke, push past your boundaries, or stir drama in moments meant for peace, you'll recognize exactly what's happening here. So let's go through this article and I'll show you how each beat mirrors the same toxic patterns so many of you have lived with. But before we begin, here's the intro. Welcome to Revealing the Narc. Join me as I highlight narcissistic traits in celebrities and public figures. Everything here is in my opinion and not professional advice. If you enjoy the analysis, please like and subscribe. Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be a great one because I'm going to go through this article here. It's titled Meghan Markle's Touchy Question to Catherine that sparked a fiery royal feud. Prince Harry described how the row escalated. I forget if it's a row or row, so excuse me on that pronunciation, but it escalated to Prince William calling the Duchess of Sussex rude and pointing a finger in her face. In this video, I'm going to talk about envy and how to recognize when someone is looking at you with envy, and we're going to talk about boundaries. It's so amazing the way Catherine communicated her boundary, and it's something I feel I definitely can learn from. The article begins in Spare. Harry describes arriving at their Kensington Palace flat and said that Meghan's mouth was open because of the decor, priceless art on the walls, books, and furniture, saying wow repeatedly. Let me pause here really quick. This article, the way that it started, I felt didn't really paint the full picture. So I put this video together starting somewhere in the middle of the article. I thought it was important to go chronologically to set up the scene. And what is being said here is that Harry and Meghan arrive at Catherine and William's home, and Meghan walks in, her mouth open, and she says, wow, wow, wow. Now, I've done a video about this a long time ago about how that would make Harry feel as a provider of the home. Like, imagine you walk in with your partner and you feel responsible for being the provider there, and your partner is just so impressed by what someone else has. I would say that this is one of the ways that this is an example of Meghan devaluing Harry. The article then says that Harry said that they had been thinking to themselves that their neighboring flat had IKEA lamps and furniture we'd recently bought on sale with Meg's credit card on sofa.com. What we're seeing here is classic envy. A malignant narcissist feels diminished when others have what they lack, and it often leads to undermining behavior. For a malignant narcissist, awe quickly flips into envy. It's not just about admiring what someone else has, it's feeling diminished by it. That envy often leads to undermining behavior because a narcissist can't tolerate the reminder that someone else's position, stability, or legacy is out of their control. And in this case, it foreshadows the hostility and conflict that followed in the meeting. I think it's so important for us to be able to spot envy in our own lives. So I wanted to give you 3 tips on spotting it. The first is micro expressions of disdain. Even if they smile, look for fleeting expressions, tight lips, narrowed eyes, or a quick eyebrow raise when they glance at your surroundings, appearance, or even your relationships. Envy leaks out in split-second flashes before they get a chance to correct themselves. The second is competitive or backhanded comments. Instead of simple admiration like, wow, this is nice, you'll hear qualifiers or subtle digs like, this must have cost a fortune, I'd never spend money that way. Or, oh, you're so lucky, I could never pull that off. The tone mixes awe with resentment. This immediately reminded me of what Meghan had said in the TIG in 2011. On the day of or around the day of Catherine and William's wedding, she said, quote, "Little girls dream of being princesses. I, for one, was all about Shira, princess of power. And grown women seem to retain this childhood fantasy. Just look at the pomp and circumstance surrounding the royal wedding and endless conversation about Princess Kate." This is a competitive comment that's being said here. And if that's how Meghan felt at a distance, imagine how she felt when she walked into Kensington Palace. Moving on, the third thing I want to mention is a shift in body language. People carrying envy often can't relax in your space. They may stiffen, cross arms, or avoid eye contact when you share something you're proud of. Sometimes they overcompensate, gushing too much almost theatrically, because the real feeling underneath is discomfort at your advantage. The article continues. They then sat down for a cup of tea and biscuits, where they asked after the Wales's children, and they in turn had asked about the Sussex's honeymoon. Meghan decided to raise the question of their relationship and tensions going back to when she started dating Harry, suggesting there had been crossed wires when Catherine thought Meghan wanted to use her connections in the fashion industry, when in fact she already had some of her own. Let's pause here. Narcissists can play polite until they find their moment to destabilize. When you look at this moment, you see the classic setup. There's small talk, civility, tea, and biscuits. But then Meghan turns the energy. She decides to raise the issue. That's not about mending, that's about control. It's less about resolution and more about rewriting the narrative in her favor. The article continues. Meghan suggested that these problems had been magnified by the wedding preparations and the discussion over bridesmaid dresses. Harry then claims that Catherine became upset and demanded an apology from Meghan for offending her when she mentioned her hormones after giving birth and suggested it had affected her memory. Let's pause here. What's telling is the timeline. Meghan tries to explain away the tension as just wedding stress and dress discussions, minimizing the real issues. But then Catherine circles back to something much more personal. Meghan's comment about her postpartum hormones and memory. That tells us the remark landed as a wound and not a misunderstanding. And notice how Harry frames it. Catherine demanded an apology. The choice of words is important. It paints Catherine as overreacting rather than simply standing up for herself after a deeply personal boundary was crossed. This is a subtle example of narrative control, minimizing Meghan's role, reframing Catherine's hurt as unreasonable, and shifting the focus onto her reaction instead of the original offense. The article continues. Meghan initially said she couldn't remember, but then added, "I remember you had forgotten something, and I said that it didn't matter, that it was because of pregnancy, because you just had a child, because of the hormones." Harry said Catherine replied, "We are not close enough for you to talk about my hormones." I love this part. I love this part. I love that Catherine communicated her boundary clearly. But let's talk about it. This entire exchange is so revealing. Meghan first says she can't remember, then suddenly she recalls it in detail. This is not empathy. This is dismissing someone's memory by blaming it on postpartum hormones, which reduces them to being unstable. And Catherine's response is powerful. She's saying, "You don't have the relationship equity with me to weaponize something as personal as my recovery from childbirth." Harry frames it as Catherine being upset and demanding an apology, but when you look at it closely, this is about respect and boundaries. Meghan crossed the line and Catherine called it out. Let's take a moment and talk about narcissists and boundaries. Boundaries expose limits, which is something that narcissists can't tolerate. A narcissist will often test or ignore boundaries to maintain control, and personal or intimate topics like health, family, vulnerabilities are common targets. One of the hallmarks of narcissistic behavior is boundary violation. Boundaries are about saying, "This is mine to share, not yours to define." But narcissists struggle with limits. They see them as threats to their control. That's why Meghan's comment about Catherine's hormones is so telling. Again, it wasn't empathy. It was crossing into something personal and using it to frame Catherine as unstable. And that's classic boundary violation. So, how can you spot if your boundary has been violated? You might feel discomfort in your gut. You feel exposed or diminished. The topic shifts into something personal that you didn't invite, and you find yourself defending or explaining something private. If you leave an interaction feeling smaller, exposed, or diminished, that's a red flag. And how do you respond if you have had your boundary violated? The best way to handle a boundary violation is exactly what Catherine did: name it calmly and directly. She didn't yell and she didn't attack. She simply said, "We are not close enough for you to talk about my hormones." That's powerful. It communicates the boundary without over explaining or justifying. When boundaries are crossed, short and clear statements are often your strongest defense. So, in summary, name the boundary calmly, be direct but not defensive, and don't over explain, keep it short. This actually leads me into a conversation I was having with my mom the other day about being around people that have a hard time with boundaries. One of the techniques I've noticed is that they leave things in an uncomfortable silence. For whatever reason, many, at least I feel like I need to fill that silence with something. So I'll just start talking and reveal things that I didn't want to reveal. I walk away feeling like I gave away too much of myself in that moment. And this is one of the lessons that I've learned, that it's okay to sit in silence with someone. The article continues. Megan then said she spoke to all her friends that way, and then William weighed in, pointing at Megan and saying it was rude and she was wrong to say it. Let's pause. What Megan does here is textbook. Instead of apologizing, she justifies. I speak to all my friends that way. Again, that's not empathy, that's deflection. It normalizes the violation by reframing it as her communication style. But William doesn't let that stand. He steps in, points at her, and calls it what it was: rude and wrong. That moment is significant because it shifts the dynamic. Catherine set the boundary and William reinforced it. For a narcissist, that kind of united front feels like a direct threat, and it often triggers escalation. Megan wasn't just confronted by Catherine's boundary, she was also exposed in front of Harry, William, and Catherine together. The article then says Meghan then told him to stop pointing in her face. The Duchess of Sussex is then said to have declared that she had not wanted to offend Catherine. They all hugged and left, Harry said, because they thought it would best to head home rather than, again, I don't remember how to pronounce this, row further. I'm going to say row. Okay, what I want to say here is that we weren't there. So we don't know how William pointed. But what I think Megan did was take advantage of whatever body language tell William was displaying. She is escalating the situation by turning on William. It shifts the focus from her comment to his behavior. It's classic redirection. Then she pivots again, declaring that she hadn't meant to offend Catherine. Notice that's not an apology, it's a denial of intent, which allows her to step back without ever admitting fault. And then comes the hug. On the surface, it looks like resolution, but in reality, it's a performance. Harry even says they thought it best to leave before things escalated further. That's not closure, that's conflict avoidance. The issue isn't solved, it's just buried, and resentment usually festers when that happens. This moment reads less like reconciliation and more like damage control. This is the bigger pattern we see over and over with narcissists. First, they escalate tension to throw others off balance. Then they retreat just enough to protect their image, usually with half measures, like denying intent instead of owning up. Finally, they perform closure: the hug, the smile, the appearance that everything is okay, but nothing is actually resolved. The real issue is left festering, which guarantees the conflict will resurface later. And here's the darker part. When this cycle repeats, the target often becomes more isolated and more self doubting. They start to question if they're the problem, if maybe they did overreact, or if it's easier just to stay quiet next time. That's how narcissists maintain control. not by solving conflicts, but by ensuring that the conflict never truly ends. What we've seen isn't just a family disagreement, it's the blueprint of narcissistic conflict. Escalate the tension, retreat with half steps, perform closure, and leave the wound unhealed. That's why these conflicts never really end. They keep resurfacing, each time leaving the target more and more uncertain. And when you look at Meghan's interactions with Catherine, William, and even Princess Charlotte, you can see the same playbook repeating itself: envy, projection, boundary violations, and unresolved tension. The takeaway: with narcissists, closure is rarely real. What looks like a hug or a resolution is often just the setup for the next round. And the cycle only breaks when someone recognizes it for what it is and refuses to play along. I'm curious to know what you all think about this. Please drop your thoughts in the comments. If this was interesting to you, please like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you'll know every time I drop a new video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you're looking for a meaningful way to support something beyond the screen, I'd love for you to consider making a donation to the National Domestic Violence Hotline in lieu of super chats and super stickers. They provide 24/7 support and resources for people in unsafe or overwhelming situations, whether that's emotional, physical, or just hard to name. Their information is on the screen should you need to contact them, and you'll find the link to donate in the description of this video. Every little bit helps, and it means a lot. Thank you again for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.